Difficult. Women.
Hello.
Hi.
We're back.
Babies. So you're all doing? How have you all been? How's it
What's
going
going
over
on?
there?
Nothing much going on in the United States of America. That's for sure.
You know, we turned around for 1 minute. We looked back and y'all have set the whole place on fire. What's going on over here?
What's
No,
happening?
just kidding. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's it's all of our faults. I'm Katie.
I'm Marie, and this is the Difficult Women podcast, where we podcast whenever we feel like there's something to get difficult about. We don't do it every Tuesdays anymore because we're not rageful every Tuesday. Just occasionally now.
Yeah, we're trying to control our rage a little bit more because it's not good for our insides.
That's right.
Just like melting my insides. All the rage. I have to stay off the internet a little bit more lately.
Yep, there's a lot of rage. I feel my chest is a little tight today, but that's why we're here. That's why we're potting.
Yeah.
How have you been? What's going on? Let's fill in our listeners. They're probably like, oh, they're back. What's been going on?
Oh, I mean, I've been good. My big news is today I'm leaving for Buffalo. 9 hours to Buffalo, by the way, you guys, from New York City. What the fuck is that about? Why is it so far? I could go to Europe and back in that time. That's okay though. I'm excited to go to Buffalo because in Buffalo, I'm going to go on a big bike trip. So we're doing like 40 miles to that water. What is it called?
The
Niagara Falls. The water. The water by the. I'm gonna escape to Canada and I'm gonna stay. That's the plan. No, and then we're gonna camp overnight and then we do a 40-mile ride back. And I just got a new bike for this trip, but for a future trip because I've been thinking about doing bike stuff I've been thinking about doing bike stuff like this since I was a kid, actually, because I read this book called I Am the Cheese, which was a book by Robert Cormier, who did YA novels that were very adult, like very, very adult content in these YA novels. And I loved him. I loved those books.
And he would ride.
In that book, there was a kid who was like riding to go see his dad, his like long lost dad or something. I got to read the book again. But he rode like the length of the United States. And I was always like, I want to do that. So I'm starting with Buffalo. That's where I'm going to start. And I have to bring my bike on the train to get up there. And I'm so anxious about this, like getting my bike to the train station and then like onto a train.
Where do you put your bike on the train?
You're just going to be
racks. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm going
to put it right next to the seat next to me. It's going to go right over my neighbor. So that's what my plan is. No, it's fine. There's like you have to like not rent, but you have to like reserve a bike rack. So I got the reservation.
Oh, cool.
I'm like ready to fight people if they don't want me to do it. But you have to take like your front wheel off. So I had to practice doing that. And then I couldn't get it back on. And I was like, oh God. So it's like, I don't know. And then with my friend, when we're, with the camping and stuff, I was like, do we know how to camp? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, how do we make a fire? And she's like, I'm not really sure. I'm like, well, maybe we won't. Like, we'll just eat like Cheerios for dinner. And she's like, no, we're going to try to make a fire. I'm like, should we though? Maybe we shouldn't. Like,
do you have a stove or anything?
She says she has some sort of a stove. I think we should just eat Cheerios and just call it a day.
I
think that we should just not
dried fruit.
Just like some, cold marshmallows. It's fine.
No, that's the best part about camping is the food, I think.
I mean, I agree, but I don't want to be the reason why like an entire national forest goes up in flames.
Yes, that's true. That is very true.
That's just my personal opinion, but.
And you have a tent and all that.
There's a tent. I went camping recently and I made the mistake. I bought my first adult sleeping bag, but because I'm an idiot trying to save $3, I bought like the children's size because I'm very small.
I did that. Yep.
And it's very small. I was like, my first day camping in that other camping, or like the second day, it was cold and I had to keep it like totally like zipped up, and I got so claustrophobic I thought I was gonna have a nervous breakdown one night. I was like, ah! Like I just felt like I was trapped in this thing, and I had to like mentally talk myself down and be like, no, you're not trapped, you're just in a sleeping bag that's a little too tight, like you're gonna be fine. But man, that was stressful. So I should have gotten. So the moral story is I just spent $3 more and just gotten a regular size sleeping bag.
You deserve an adult size one.
I really regret that I thought I was, I overestimated how small I am. I'm small, but not a 10-year-old boy small.
Yeah, I went randomly. It was like a last minute camping situation where I like quickly went to Walmart and got a kid's one, and it literally came up under my tits. It was just like
mine comes all the way. Like I can get it over my head. It's
That's
just
wild.
so narrow. Like I just feel like very like I'm in the Matrix in that thing. You know when in the actual other side of the Matrix in the pod or whatever. I don't like it. It makes me feel like I'm gonna like if the aliens come down, then I'll never get out of the sleeping bag. They'll just take me up in one little bundle and then start probing.
Wow.
Anyway, how have you been? What have you been up to? That's my story.
Well, my big news, which I'm like over the moon about, is I booked a national worldwide commercial.
Yeah.
First one. I've been auditioning. It's funny. Everyone's like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Like blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, incredibly. I'm so grateful. I booked. But I've been auditioning for national commercials for 20 years. I was thinking about that.
That's crazy.
This is my first national commercial in 20 years.
It's hard. I mean, that just goes to show. It's hard to be an actor.
Gotta keep fucking doing it.
Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm under NDA, so I can't say what it's for. But it's a big fucking deal. And
is it anal beads? No, just kidding.
Everyone was texting me like, congratulations on your yeast infection commercial. And I was like, I mean, why? I mean, yeah, maybe. That would feel right.
Maybe.
I would totally do that. It's not yeast infection. It's something bigger than that. But we shot it last week and it was so fun. And
fun. Yeah. It's so fun being on set with those things.
Oh my God.
It really is. It makes you go like, oh yeah, this is what I want to be doing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It was like the best day of my life. Like they were like, Miss Anderson, right this way to the makeup and like doing makeup, and they did our nails. And like the funny thing though is that that Tuesday, so we shot last Thursday, we had a big fitting on that Tuesday, and I got to try on like Prada and Gucci and like all these amazing costumes, 4 incredible costumes. The night before the shoot, I get a text. Can you break that jumper that you auditioned in?
Oh, that's so funny.
And that's what I ended up wearing on set.
That's so funny.
Was what I auditioned in. And then I made a joke that, did I just book this job because of that jumper? Because everyone was making such a fuss about it.
Whatever.
I know.
Who cares if that's what it is?
Jeremy was like, if commercial's going to air and it's just going to be the jumper, like my full face will be like photoshopped out.
Yeah, just the jumper is acting. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. But anyway, it was so exciting. And my agent here, this is my first booking with the agent. So it's a good thing. Just going to keep doing it. So
yeah, no, that's good juju. You just got to keep the momentum going.
Yes. So that was really exciting. So stay tuned.
Fun. Yes.
Hopefully it'll be on your TV.
Yes, it will.
Anyway, okay. Besides these amazing things that we're doing, today we're just trying to make sense of what's happening right now.
On a different level, because like we there's stuff about this abortion. We're talking about abortion stuff today. We're always weird and cryptic about this shit. Let's just tell you what we're talking about. We're talking about abortion stuff again, but because there's another angle that we don't always fully understand and look at, and that's the legal angle. And the thing about it is we can try to sit here and hash this shit out, but I don't know anything about technical legal jargon and shit. I don't know what's going on.
No, not at all.
I like to pretend like I know, but I don't. So we are so excited to welcome Mackenzie Joy Brennan. She is a podcaster and a constitutional lawyer. She's going to help us out because we don't know what we're talking about, and she's going to clarify all the facts from fictions and all the garbage I say. I'm sure she can help me with. Welcome. Thank you for coming, Mackenzie.
Yes. Make sense of all this madness for us.
Hi, ladies. I'm so glad to be here, except for the circumstance. And I appreciate the credit that I will help you make sense of it. We'll see if I actually can do that, because who can, really?
Right.
Who the fuck knows?
Right.
Well, we really appreciate that you reached out to us in the first place, because you are an expert, we believe, and a constitutional lawyer. You've been practicing. And do you want to just give our audience just a little background of who you are and what you've done? And
yeah, I'll say most of the boring stuff, but yeah, so I am a constitutional lawyer. I have a background working in more government spheres in New York. So I worked for the court system there and for a couple judges. I'm also licensed to practice in Arizona, which has been especially interesting, and hopefully will get more interesting and like I'll be able to get more involved. in what's going on in Arizona, there's a real difference between the two states. So that's been crazy to watch. And yeah, certainly reaching out. I think so many of us are looking for ways to feel like we're being productive or that we're making some difference. So this is me grappling at sanity and trying to apply myself like all of us.
It's very helpful because like the kind of stuff that you know about this topic is very different, I think, from what your average layperson American knows. And, we were talking earlier behind the scenes about about how like what we get I don't want to say get fed because it's like what is demonstrated to us is usually like things we have a lot of conversations about the biology stuff where it's like, when is the heartbeat really a heartbeat? When is the baby a baby? When is it? And all of that is like very important conversation, but that seems to be like so much more of what we like know and what we think about and we talk about. But the law stuff, for lack of, I don't know, what do you call it? The law shit.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
It's nice to know a little bit more about what's actually going on because I realize like I don't really know. So Mackenzie, what is going on?
Yeah. I realized also I should say up top that I have had an abortion, a surgical abortion, which is something that like, I know not everybody is comfortable talking about their experience. I happen to be super okay with it and did not feel anything but positive stuff about it. So that's worth noting that at least I have also been through, it's a super easy procedure. It's, easier and less risky than getting your wisdom teeth out or getting your appendix out.
Thank you for saying that.
Side note there. Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks for, and not that everybody wants to say their experience, but thank you for sharing yours because it does make people more comfortable sharing their own experience because there's nothing to be ashamed of or have any feelings about.
Hopefully it makes it easier for those who want it to be easier to talk about.
Right.
So,
right. So for starters, the big question I think that a lot of us have that we're not totally sure about is there's debate about whether the Roe v. Wade original upholding of the whatever that is called, whether it was even a good thing or a bad thing, or whether, we've been talking on the pod about how like it wasn't even that great of a thing, a lawyer thing, a law thing.
So I mean, I'll try to limit this a little bit because I'm just realizing now, like, man, this thing that I spent a lot of years getting to know maybe isn't even going to be super relevant going forward. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe they'll bring back the same standard. But here's a fun fact. It actually was not Roe that provided the current standard before Dobbs. It was Casey, technically. So Planned Parenthood versus Casey was one of the first successful challenges to Roe versus Wade, and it was in 1992. And it changed some of the aspects. It actually walked Roe back a little bit. So Roe v. Wade was better than Casey in that it said that a woman's right to choose is a fundamental right. And if you say that something is a fundamental right under the Constitution, it gets the highest levels of protection. States have to show the highest levels of justification for making laws that infringe on that. So generally a very good thing if you get the court, as they did in Roe, to say that something is a fundamental right. So Casey did walk that back a little bit, changed the standard to viability is when states have to start caring more about the life of the child versus Roe used a trimester approach. I mean, in all these cases, we have very old, often male jurists legislating essentially based on medical facts that apply to women. So, I mean, even something like viability, not defined, but so the thing that gets kind of complicated and that you hear referenced a lot is there a basis in the Constitution? And so I know in the Dobbs decision, Alito talks a lot about like, well, the word abortion is not in the Constitution, which so many words are not in the fucking Constitution. And we know that doesn't make any difference because there are plenty of rights that like the right to contract, the right to privacy in other contexts. So what I kind of like about Roe v. Wade and what was, I think, a good argument is that it based this right to privacy on, let me backtrack a little bit. If we all remember civics or fucking not, I went to school in Arizona, so I didn't get a lot of it. But there was a big debate in the framing of the Constitution about like, should we enumerate rights? Should we list out everything that we want to be protected? Or should we leave the door open because once we start listing, then people are going to assume that if it's not on the list, it's not protected, right? So they kind of struck a balance and they're like, well, use big categories, but we won't list everything because then we'll rule stuff out. Thus, we get this right to privacy thing. So they kind of agreed that not everything was going to be in the Constitution, but they have a lot of things that suggest that the right to privacy should be protected. And a case before Roe that Roe was based on talks about all these rights, like, you don't have to quarter soldiers in your home idea. That was one of them. Protections against search and seizure. That's another one. Freedom to associate with who you want. All these kind of come together and cast shadows that cover the idea of a right to privacy. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
So okay, cool.
Yes. The bottom line is, if you list everything out, then people can make an argument. Well, it's not on the list. But if you say, look, these are the general umbrellas, then we can have a little more freedom as the world changes and modernizes. And
the framers even, there's plenty of evidence and direct statements that they intended that. They didn't want to list everything out because that was bad, but they list out these general concepts. So what Roe did was looked at all these, they call them like penumbras, so like the shadows and the umbrellas of the other rights. And then they went to the due process protection that says you can't deprive the people of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. They look at liberty, which is an undefined term, and they say, all right, so what does liberty, the liberty interest mean? Well, if it doesn't mean privacy, it means fucking nothing. Because, we're already talking about like no incarceration. So liberty's got to mean something like fundamental and personal. It has to mean things like privacy, bodily integrity, safety to make choices about your own self, stuff like that. That due process right to liberty is what Roe used as its constitutional basis for protection. So that's my long answer for, was it good or bad? I think it's a great argument for what in the Constitution supports this, because what does that right to liberty mean if not you can decide what is in your hole? Like,
Right. And then, like, I guess the fear has been that, like, well, the issue is that there's not this like explicit thing that says women's rights are, you know what I mean? That there's a woman's right to choose. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I thought that was a great point. When Julie was on your show, she mentioned RBG kind of having some issues with how Roe was decided, because it maybe cut the line through the political process where, it polarized states. It definitely mobilized the Republicans and whatnot. And ultimately, we never got to the place that there was anything but a Supreme Court ruling, which should be more protection than it ended up being. Like, you're not supposed to be able to just, overturn standards willy-nilly, but it is like an apolitical body that's not elected that is protecting this. So it would be better if there was some political implement and legislation that said on a federal level, like basically the same thing that Roe and Casey said, but codifying it into federal law.
Got it. Okay. So it wasn't what they said, it was just that it wasn't codified.
Yeah. And I mean, some people make the argument that like, maybe there's a better constitutional basis. Maybe you go equal protection and say like, well, men have this freedom. I think that that's more difficult to make the argument than the whole liberty interest thing. But, the court has gotten so into this original intent thing, which is actually a relatively new school of thought. It's like about as young as I am, which is kind of funny.
And the original idea is the original intent of the Constitution.
That's what they allege. They're like, yeah, this is what the framers meant, which there's plenty of evidence that they didn't intend that. But it's what people like Scalia was like the real forefront of that movement. It's the way for them to be regressive and say like, well, nobody liked women or blacks back then, so the states should be allowed to hate them now. Right.
Yeah. That's great. So, love it. Yes. What a great,
right? Cool.
What a great stance to have.
Dick argument.
Yeah. Progress.
But yeah, I just always think it's super ironic that original intent is actually like a very young school of judicial thought.
Which is like a lot of those things.
Now. Yeah, it feels very divine intervention type of language.
It's what they're trying to call it, right? It's like how governments of corrupt countries are like People's Democratic Republic of whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm buying it now.
Right.
But
well, it's like how Mormonism is like, they make it look like, wow, everyone's so like old fashioned-y. It's like, yeah, this started like 10 days ago. Like,
exactly.
Somebody just made this up, was like, this is what we wear and how we, you know, so it's like
all advertising.
It's tricky. It's advertising.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So does that answer your questions up until this point?
Yes, it's very helpful.
Okay.
I think just to clarify,
Great.
and like most things, the internet tries to simplify everything, and things tend to be much more black and gray, not black and white.
Yes,
gray.
Exactly. And I wish it were easy. If it were easy, I feel like we would have hacked this a long time ago. But,
for sure.
Alas.
So then, what's up with like what other law things do we need to know about this? Like, I don't know. I really don't know about it. And I like to talk like I know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm
Oh my gosh. I think the fact that you guys are so really self-deprecating, nobody fucking knows what's going on.
Yeah.
It shows that you do not have to be self-deprecating, because it's the people who act like they know what's going on that like I don't trust them.
Yeah, I agree.
So the next thing that I think is relevant to talk about, just for like a hot second, is the other dominoes that can fall now that this is, because
that's important.
I think that's kind of a good bridge between what the old standard was and then like looking at the current constitution and federal law and like what we can do next. Is that
yes
work for you guys?
Yes. I think that's another thing that we've been hearing. Oh, sorry, Marie.
Oh, no, I was just going to say maybe some hope at the end of the tunnel.
Or also more horrifying things to come, but we need to know about what's coming. Because that's another thing. It's like you hear like, the dominoes. You're like, what? Huh? Which ones? Which ones are going to fall?
So you hear a lot about like gay marriage being on the chopping block. And I am sorry to tell you that is absolutely in the chain of because basically we're looking at other cases that use this same reasoning, right? That use this like liberty interest, right to privacy, that there's this fundamental freedom to make choices about your bodily integrity and stuff like that. Marriage is one that uses a very similar justification. So Obergefell, which was the gay marriage case, especially given like the weird religious agenda that seems to be driving the way that this court makes decisions, I'm very worried about that. And then the fact that the case that Roe was based on was about access to contraception, and that used the same reasoning. Those are the next two that I'm really fucking scared about.
And that's so because of what you're saying. See, I didn't fully realize this, which I think is what's great about having you. Yeah, is that because so if they use marriage under the same ideology, whatever, why it's like should be protected. It's that's why people are talking about also interracial marriage.
Yeah. Especially because Clarence Thomas happens to be in an interracial marriage, but is very comfortable repealing right to liberty type cases when it's gay marriage or when it's women's bodies. So that's especially
right. But also
messy.
Like knowing the way all these people like to think that they might say, oh yeah, we won't touch interracial marriage, and then what? They said they weren't going to touch Roe v. Wade. So like that's kind of insane to me too. That like
the only thing I think on interracial marriage is that one of the conservative justices is in an interracial marriage, so he's probably not. But then they'll vote it. They'll outnumber him. I don't know. And maybe it'll come later. I don't know. Maybe not. But I'm just saying. It's possible.
Maybe. That's the point.
Maybe. It also, at the very least, it shows how incoherent the court is willing to be.
Right.
In terms of its own decisions, just to like take out these weird political points. Because it's like, if they take down gay marriage at the very least, how does that square with keeping any other type of marriage protection?
Right. Which like, again, to clarify, if people forgot, like that Supreme Court is supposed to be apolitical, right? They're supposed to be, they're not supposed to have political feelings about things. I mean, personally.
They're supposed to decide first on the Constitution.
Yes, right. I'm not saying that, but yeah.
I mean, it's gotten messier, right? Because one of the big things that I kind of wish Democrats would talk about more, and maybe greater minds than mine have reasons why this shouldn't be looked at. But I feel like at least 3 Supreme Court justices at the moment are there under dubious circumstances.
Right. Yes.
Right. And just will you just tell us real quick who and what they are, just so if people don't know?
Yeah, let's make our hit list. No, wait.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. But yeah, no, maybe this is a good bridge into like the federal variables that could come next. I again, I have not heard this as like a strategy. So this is literally just my own mind going there.
Sure.
Maybe people don't want to touch the court because it is like this supreme apolitical whatever. But you got Gorsuch, who that seat was definitely Obama's to fill. And it was basically the whole Mitch McConnell thing being like, no, we're not gonna vote on it because there's no time. There's simply no time. And there were like 9 months left or some shit.
Yeah.
And Merrick Garland, who's now Attorney General, was the nominee. He deserved at least a hearing and a vote, but didn't even give him that. So Gorsuch is arguably a stolen, falsely appointed justice, which is of the new justices, no indictment on Gorsuch himself, but the circumstances that
shady. Yeah.
And then Kavanaugh is a credibly accused, like sex crime committer, almost certainly perjured himself at the very least in a federal hearing because he was caught lying about details that had to do with that. So if people aren't into the whole, like, maybe you can sell the perjury thing to men who are like, well, it's he said, she said, but he did lie
under oath.
And also this is a job interview and he's crying about how much he loves beer. To me, I wouldn't hire that person.
Yeah.
That's just me. But so there's one. And then, if they made the whole argument about not having enough time when Merrick Garland was appointed, RBG died within weeks of the election and Amy Coney Barrett was rushed through. So if we're using the same reasoning, then that is not a correct appointment.
Right.
And
Also,
then the last, go ahead.
No, you're going to say it.
Oh, and then the last thing that actually might come to relevance, like in the near future, is that Clarence Thomas's wife is a pretty aggressive conservative activist who the January 6th Insurrection Committee is considering subpoenaing.
Yeah, which they should, because she's really been active with that. Which is weird.
Yeah, and she apparently, there was something about her talking about document suppression or like decisions that were coming before the court. So it's very possible that there will be evidence of Clarence Thomas abusing his role.
Yeah.
So those are the court issues.
In addition to that, Clarence Thomas also was very credibly accused of sexual misconduct.
Side note.
Side note. He shouldn't have been there the whole time. But fine.
Yeah, it's been like 30 years since he was credibly accused of certainly sex offenses.
Yeah.
And some of the weirdest ones I've ever, like, his quote was something like, "Who has put this pubic hair on my Coke?"
Jesus. Get that nerd out of here.
Get out of here. Gross. Yeah, so those are my questions about the sitting justices on our kangaroo court.
Is there any hope to be able to to stack the courts, or what did they say? What are the Republicans so afraid of? What's their wording?
Right? Like court packing.
Court packing.
Hey, FDR did it to great success, if you ask me. Oh God, I just sounded like Borat. That's pretty incredible. All right. No, that's a great question. I think it kind of brings us to like, what are some federal options? A lot of it, and like Katie was saying, there's so much more to these questions than can be answered in like a tweet type format. There's all this stuff about like the interplay of the Commerce Clause and the Privileges and Immunities Clause. So there's a lot of long story to this, but one thing that could be done, is codifying, so passing a federal law, which would require both houses of Congress, which we should do sooner rather than later because the midterms are coming up. But some sort of codification of the standard in Roe and Casey. So just doing the same thing, but putting it in a statute versus a court ruling. And then the court packing thing is something that is being held up by my home state own Democratic Senator, Kyrsten Sinema, who really broke my heart because I didn't see this coming when I voted for her. But you have to repeal the filibuster because that is something that for the courts requires more votes than they would have. It's like more than a simple majority, right? So that's what they need. They need to repeal the filibuster first, and then they would have to add seats to the court, which is another good option, especially given that we're like worst case scenario right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is not on topic, but why was Kristen Sinema, what do you think she's lost her mind? What's going on there? Because you probably followed more
what
her.
Yeah, what the fuck, Kristen?
I think it's like a fucking Occam's razor thing. The simplest explanation is probably that she's getting corporate money now. And there is a decent amount of evidence of that. In fact, even with the infrastructure, whatever that last bill title was,
right.
She was recorded calling a corporate pharmaceutical donor and being like, is this written in a way that's bad?
Oh, no. What a bummer. Okay. That's all I need to know. I just was curious. I was like, she's been possessed by the devil, but no, it's not that.
It's
he was like a bisexual Democrat from Arizona. I was like, fuck,
this is great. Yeah, no,
I know.
Yeah, she's lost her way.
Yeah, but also
anyway.
do we primary her if we need somebody who would win, who's a Democrat, if we want to, it's all very complicated.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, back to abortion. More
sick.
Yeah. So what are some other things that can be done legally?
So the last thing that there's like this interplay between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And a lot of this comes down to what the Constitution delegates to different branches in terms of power. So this is why I always feel a little bit bad when Biden gets a lot of hate, because yes, in general, the Democrats need to strategize better and there needs to be like playing offense rather than defense kind of thing. But the president actually doesn't have a ton of powers to do things unilaterally, so by themselves. But what Biden can do, I think, he's made a great step so far. Obviously, there's the appointing of Supreme Court justices. So if that's not an impetus to vote, fuck, yeah. And I think you guys were both saying that before we started recording, that's a great reminder.
Yeah, and just as I remember having moments with men specifically who really didn't like Joe or didn't like Hillary Clinton as an option. Yep. And I was like, and they were either going to throw their vote away or just not vote. And I was like, it's about the Supreme Court. It's about the Supreme Court. And they I think people just really didn't know what that meant. I think honestly, even the guys I was talking to, if I really was able to show them this is what this means. Yeah, they could.
That's optimistic, honestly, of you. And I hope
they just don't care.
I hope you're right. I do feel like there's some messaging issues on the left where perfect kind of becomes the enemy of the good. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, she's not perfect, or they're not doing everything I want, so fuck everyone. And that's how we lose.
Right.
But yeah, so Biden did pass an executive order recently, which coordinates with Attorney General Merrick Garland, who appears again in our story. And I feel like for the powers that the president has, pretty decent. It does, let's see here. I did my research reading all these fucking abbreviations. So HHS, Health and Human Services, I think that is. It's a federal agency. They're supposed to take action and then report back to Biden. So they protect emergency medical care, access to contraception, continued availability of medication abortion, further protections for protecting patient information. So strengthening HIPAA, fraud protections that can help clinics protect patient information, et cetera. Working on public education, convening volunteer lawyers. And they launched this site called Reproductiverights.gov, which has complaint filing for any abortion or reproductive justice related discrimination. So that's good. And the Attorney General is going to start working on federal law and protecting things like if you want to cross state lines and get an abortion, those are things that are going to be challenged under federal versus state powers. And so those are things that he's going to have to be very
Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah,
that's
right?
Very Handmaid's Tale.
That's my biggest fear being in Tennessee. And I know that you feel the same way in Arizona.
Yeah.
We go into effect full abortion ban August 25th. But what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to, obviously I'm in Tennessee, so I'm trying to really understand this. But so they passed, it's called, I didn't know this is what it's called, but it's Tennessee's Human Life Protection Act.
Beautiful. All right.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
You fucking horrible
They really are
human
better
being.
than
Tell us what this is, because I have no idea what
So
this is.
it's what goes into effect August 25th is that they persecute physicians.
Yeah.
They criminalize any doctors that will help a person with an abortion. It is a Class C felony.
And that's so scary because, I mean, I know both of you know, I know many of your listeners know, till all of us are blue in the face, we've said it, but that things like anything that threatens a woman's health, pregnancies that aren't viable anyways, miscarriage, things like that are going to be all messed up in this, because especially when laws don't draw a line, because they can't, because they don't understand medicine, of what is allowed and what's not. All of a sudden, doctors don't want to do their jobs because their ass is on the line. So I don't have any great answer for that in terms of what you do, because that's what will happen is people will probably die. Physicians will err on the side of not protecting that type of thing. What I think the best option is in terms of what we should be looking for next steps is a federal law that codifies the standard so that there's some protection. And I think you were kind of referencing this, both of you, when you talked about like, was the Roe standard okay? Because it technically didn't mention women or people with uteruses, people who can get abortions. So that would be the first step, is like getting some law that protects that. And then what's going to come up with Merrick Garland and with like, does the federal government have power or do state governments have power? Are all these issues about like the Constitution has something called the Commerce Clause, which delegates to the federal government power to regulate anything that has to do with interstate commerce. And so interstate commerce is arguably crossing state lines to procure procedures and medical care. So that's something that arguably the federal government has power to control rather than states prohibiting it. And so there will probably be some sort of clash, which again, you're a little stuck, because where would that clash of powers end up? Likely the Supreme Court. But that is a step. And then there's some other protections too, like that liberty interest in due process, equal protection clause. There's something called the Privileges and Immunities Clause, which is like the government of one state can't deny rights of citizens of the US to one another. So you could see that kind of coming up if you can't go into one state and get something because your home state's gonna, you kind of see generally the direction that these fights will take.
Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaid's Tale, yeah. We all should self-immolate, light ourselves on fire.
Yeah. In protest. Yes. Or move to Canada. Wow. So what do we do? I mean, is it how much we just sit around, we vote.
Vote.
Yeah.
And I think also, like, give your time and money. If you can't give money, give your time and labor. And if you can't give money, give your time.
What do you think about, like, what happens when each state ends up with these, like, extremely different laws? Like, when New York is like, it's fine, everybody get an abortion. Right. And then Tennessee is like, oh, everyone's going to jail for even thinking about it.
Dude, you know what? The first thing that came to my mind was, like, this is like the Fugitive Slave Act. Where before the Civil the Civil War, they had all these conflicts about, like, well, the southern states want the northern states to cooperate and catch their property and return it. Back. And the northern states were like, fuck you, we're a sanctuary.
Those are humans, yeah.
Yeah. And that honestly...
Handmaid's Tale.
I know, right? We saw how that one ended. There was a war. Yeah. I mean... That, like, this is literally just me theorizing in my room when I can't sleep.
No, but I think... but I mean, and it really keeps you up forever.
Yeah, right.
But... No, I mean, I think this is like the thing that, like, I don't know.
States' rights becomes the the cloak that a lot of shitty causes wear, you know?
Yeah.
Because a lot
and
of
it's interesting because
discrimination.
it's like state rights are important in a giant country like we live in, so that we're not steamrolling some of those, like a South Dakota, right? Where like we talked about this on a previous episode, where it's like, you know, if there's no state rights and there's this, like, tell me if I'm wrong about this, by the way, but if there's no state rights and then the like federal people are just like, okay, the law is, you know, everybody, the speed limit is going to be 30 miles an hour, because in New York City, if you drive really fast, you're going to kill a lot of people. In South Dakota, there's nobody around.
Sure.
So if everybody has to drive 30 miles an hour out there, they're going to be like, what the fuck? You know, so it's like, there's different needs for different states. And it is important that like people are represented and that they
You're
have
totally
blah, blah,
right.
blah.
And I mean, what I feel is that those types of issues are already delegated to the states, that like things like internal police power and local laws in the current structure, without airing this far to like,
interesting. Yeah.
They're
and
already,
then this feels like an overreach.
Yes, absolutely. And so, I think you had mentioned, both of you, in the last 2 episodes, so the one with Julie and then the one after Dobbs actually came to fruition, like feeling very disillusioned about the political process, and also feeling like the federal government shouldn't be as concerned in, and I agree. And certainly conservatives in my head have it backwards, because they want the government out of everything except our genitals and bedrooms.
Right. So insane.
But the justification that I do like to use, especially in terms of things like states' rights versus federal, is think of like the Americans with Disabilities Act. Like, we've tried no regulation from the federal government, and usually left to their own devices, people are not necessarily going to protect each other and the most vulnerable in the same way that federal law can. So my suggestion is always like, get involved in making those choices of your federal legislators and your local ones. Stay active in those communities so that you have an influence on those, rather than just getting rid of them entirely.
Right.
And, you know, to each their own, but that's my suggestion, is like, get more involved, you know, stay abreast of local, state, national elections, yell, give money, give time.
It's kind of crazy too that like I don't know. I mean, that's a different conversation too, but just that like we should all be required to vote, because
I agree.
and be required to be active, you know, and like what's going on, and like, you know, I don't know.
And people just don't have the same dedication to that here that they do in other countries. And this is what happens.
We've been so like quote unquote lucky, or a lot of us have, the majority of the white people have at least, that like we just haven't felt like the urge. Yeah, we don't have to. I mean, that's why like you don't have a lot of like, you know, what is that called? Like organizers, like local like community organizers in like white people, because like we haven't had to. Right? Yeah.
And I think we kind of discourage each other from doing it, like in a weird way. Twitter maybe becomes the vessel, and I shouldn't blame it as much, but I see so many people on Twitter like blasting lesser evilism and talking about like, oh, the Democrats are trying to fundraise off of this. Fuck you. I get the frustration. I hate fundraising emails, but I don't get this pissed off when like NPR sends me. But like for some reason we eat our own. I don't get it.
No, I definitely I don't get it either, but and I agree, the fundraising thing is so annoying, but it is part of what makes people win right now. This is how it's not been like happening.
Shitty,
especially if you don't go out and vote, then like they really need the money. So like, you know, there is a way to do it without it. But
we just had primaries here in Tennessee, and there was the county over for, I don't know exactly what the count was in my county, but the one over that they've been in the news because the school board, like people pushing and fighting and all that sort of shit. They had 20% turnout.
And I feel like that's probably good too. It's like, oh, yeah, they're 20%.
Like, high. Yeah, it was 12 last. Yeah. But it's so, And I mean, I was out for drinks with a friend of mine, and she had no idea that there was an election that day.
It's people who you're not that different from.
No.
And yet, we're not good about the messaging on that one. Yeah, so that
like,
maybe that's the biggest takeaway is like everybody work on that if they can.
Yeah, talk to your friends.
Yeah.
It's like what? And also, like, I make this joke now, but like, because I keep hearing girls being like, let's list Strata their asses and like withhold sex. And I'm like, that hurts me because I love sex.
No, that's
I'm not
dumb.
gonna.
Also,
no.
people will get raped. They will absolutely, like,
And
people
also,
don't
like,
get the choice every time. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. But I will be checking a person's voter registration card before they enter my pussy from now on because I had
Perfect.
I had a little mishap a couple months ago. I didn't know he didn't vote.
I've slept with boys who have procured abortions for other people who I've heard nothing from.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I am in the same boat. That's the thing that's made me the most upset is some of these people that like, they'll use it as a thing when it serves them. But then now when it's time to really speak up and have like a real voice about this and say, hey, I have benefited from this. Yeah. They have gone radio silent and they are happy to shout about other things, but God forbid. And it's like that abortion saved your life too.
Yeah.
You know,
but they feel like they were doing a good thing. Probably, like, I find a lot of men in those circumstances are like, well, I'm being a good guy by actually helping pay or go with, as if it's not their ass on the line as well, because physically they're not affected in the same way.
You have a goddamn baby if it comes out. Right. What are you going to do with that? Like, even if you just are like, bye-bye, see you later, like you've just like fully affected a life in a way that is much more deep and poignant than like, you know, worrying about, heartbeat, was it, you're going to kill this baby? Right? It's like, no, you're going to like ruin a life. Like, you know what I mean?
And that's where it's like, we have no societal accountability and where things like misogyny and weird gender rights come into play. Cause it's like, but ultimately, like, until maybe a child support ruling, which will not be enforced, like they really aren't affected.
Right.
No, if they don't want to be.
Right.
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 So,
I mean, they are energetically in the sense that there is like a baby with DNA flying around.
They should
this
feel
world
more
that they should
but,
feel better.
Yes. But society is not, we all know society is not going to otherwise hold them accountable. So
no, they don't care.
Yeah. But no, so men who do speak up, thank you so fucking much. Yes. And please continue to do so. If you're not,
whether or not you've had an abortion, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's fine if you just are supportive. Great. Please continue. Loud. Be loud.
So, Sick, did we solve it? Did we fix it?
I think we fixed it. I think we all understand all of the lawyer stuff now. All law is now clear. Thank you so much. This was really, really helpful in clarifying even things that I wasn't sure about, and even I wasn't sure about. I have no idea.
Man, I'm so glad. Thank you, ladies, and thank you both for what you're doing too, because you will be the ones who help me translate shit like this in a way that people actually want to listen to, you know, that's fun and consumable. And I think that all of you are such a good, that you two are, and I was thinking about it when Julie was on, that a great lesson in getting engaged in general is like, do what you feel that you can do the best and you want to do, and find a way to purpose that towards making a difference. Like, we don't all have to be like lawyers or phone bank volunteer. Like, we don't all have to give money. Find the thing that you do and make that the way that you give back.
Yes.
And love it. That's
speaking of which, I'm actually performing at an Abortion Care Tennessee event where all the proceeds go towards Abortion Care Tennessee. It's on September 1st here in Nashville, Tennessee. So if y'all are listening and you're in Nashville, come on out
and watch it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's great.
That's very cool.
And where can people find you, Mackenzie?
You can find me on all the social stuff at MKZ Joy Brennan. And other than that, screaming in either New York or Arizona.
I love it. Just on the street, just tearing your hair out. Yeah, it's like relatable.
Come on down to Tennessee and scream with me.
Scream there. I absolutely will.
Oh, thank you so much. We are so grateful for you and your voice and your brain, especially.
Yes, we need your brain. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, too.